this is why I love books, because I think books are our most valuable form of media, actually, because I think when you're reading a book, you're immersed in the context of it. You're not looking for, you don't approach it quite so much with that confirmation bias. Obviously there is a bit of that, but you are more willing to be changed. You're more, because you're immersed in it. And this is why I often say reading is a radical act. It's a radical act of resistance, because it's not, the system doesn't want us to reflect. And I know that sounds terribly conspiracy theorist, but it doesn't serve the system well for us to dwell on things and think about things in the bigger picture, in the longer term. We're stuck. We're mired in the present by a system that wants to keep us there so it can keep us hungry.
Tim, welcome to the Accidental Gods podcast on this beautiful sunny September morning. How are you and where are you in the world just now?
Thank you for having me, Amanda. I'm fabulous. I'm working out what shape I am and aligning myself with myself. That's how I am. We might talk a bit about what that means. And where I am, well, I'm in North Leeds. And nice. And I'm looking out, and it's a beautiful sunny day here. There's some clouds coming in. There were parakeets flying over our house earlier this morning.
How does that happen in Leeds?
It's only just
feral parakeets
arrive in Leeds. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. It's these are the times that we live in, but they are a flash of beauty. So I did quite like them. I know some people don't like those things.
So now we need to get the ecologist to tell us what it is that they're displacing by coming in. Are these ones that? Yeah, have they moved up from London? Lots of people in London let parakeets out?
I guess so. We've had them in Leeds for a little while, but they've only just arrived in my neighbourhood over the summer. We came back from our holes, and there they were, parakeets in North Leeds. So There you go.
Wow. And I also want to ask the ecologist what predates on parakeets, because the sparrowhawks will have a field day if they recognise, because it'll be dead easy to see, because they're not really as camouflaged as sparrows.
No.
Cool. Right. Okay, back to the podcast. So you are a bookseller, a regenerative designer, and a rebel economist. And as you said, you're getting back into the shape of yourself. Tell us a bit about how all of those three arose and how they feed into Piʌot, which is how I found you, of which you are not the founder, but the source. And we'll talk about that too. So pick any of those and run with it. Over to you.
Well, let's start with the books. So I am the founder and curator of an online book subscription called Adventurous Inc. And I've been running it for the past 8 years. And I started that business while I was still working as head of economic policy and head of business in an economic development agency, a local enterprise partnership. And basically I think I was digging my own escape tunnel from my career. And eventually the tunnel was shored up sufficiently by selling books about travel, nature and adventure that I was confident enough to leave that role, which was a big step.
How long ago are we talking?
It was 2020. So
well into the Amazon period. So you manage a book subscription service at a time when people can just log on to Amazon and pick something up off Kindle Unlimited for nothing. Well done.
Yeah, and it's. I think what I started out selling. I tried to disrupt the retail industry, so I came up with this great idea, like Library of Things, and applying that to retail. So instead of, I was selling high-end folding kayaks, which were beautiful, and you could fold them down to the size of a suitcase, and these amazing tree tents that you could hang in the trees. And I was selling them to groups of people rather than individuals. So I'd say, look, get 3 mates together, and this amazing kayak that costs £2,000 or £1,500.
Right, but then you share
is yours for a quarter of the price. And so that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to find a way to be in business in a way that is what the world needed, rather than kind of constantly pushing that consumerist aspect. And I've got to be honest, I didn't have the skills to do that at that particular point. I got no retail background. I was a policy wonk. but I took the learning from that and applied it to the other stuff that I do. And one of the fundamental things I learned is that people don't make rational decisions. I was there. Yeah, people want to go kayaking. They would love this kayak, and therefore they would like it 4 times as much if it costs a quarter of the price. And what I learned was that I was running in the face of our emotional connection with buying things, and that was a big learning for me. So it was really useful. But after a couple of years, I switched into the book subscription, because in the end, the sharing retail thing hadn't worked. I started selling sustainable outdoor clothing and equipment.
Because does that exist? Because even Patagonia is still PFAS filled until next year.
As sustainable as we could make. So I was both selling other people's stuff. So I was selling Finisterre stuff, desperately trying to get into Patagonia, but they wouldn't. They're quite selective about who they have in, and I was a new.
You're not a big enough store, I can imagine.
And then I made some stuff myself. So I didn't make them myself. I got a shoe manufacturer in the north of England, Walsh, to make me some beautiful Ventile trainers. Wow. So it was a natural product that was waterproof. And kind of fit that bill. But eventually I realized that I was just pumping up the consumer bubble. I was just perpetuating this thing of, to get outdoors, you need some more kit. And hey guys, it just so happens I've got some kit for you. Would you like to buy it? Right. And I realized that it wasn't the reason I wanted to be in business. I wanted to be in business to do something more. And I latched onto this idea of what people really needed was a way of making more of their experiences while they're outdoors, and the books and spending time in the company of nature writers, of adventurers, of people going places and doing interesting things under their own power would be really interesting, and would be something that people wanted. And it turned out, thankfully, that it was.
You were right. Okay, so vicarious traveling for when you can't actually do the real thing.
Well, so I actually left my job right at the start of lockdown. My final role as head of economic policy was to predict the impact of the coronavirus. And based on government predictions, it looked like we were going to have the biggest recession, the highest levels of unemployment. But even so, I still left my job to go and pursue this, what could have been a pipe dream. But it turned out that selling books about travel, nature and adventure to people who've all of a sudden had their horizons locked down and had huge amounts of time was actually quite a good time to be selling to those folk. So it helped me through. And I've come to realize, so that when I was working as head of economic policy, I wasn't just pursuing economic growth. Technically, that was what our organization was there to do. But what I was trying to do was do that in a sensitive and sustainable way. So the last thing that I did there, the last big thing, was establish England's only carbon negative industrial strategy. The government didn't say, off you go. All organisations like mine, there are about 30 of them across the UK, and we're sort of received policy direction from government, and they said, off you go and prepare this local industrial strategy, which shows how you're going to grow your local economy.
Because this was under the Tories, and growing the economy, mind you, growing the economy is still a thing under Labour. Anyway,
we'll come back to that. So they said, go off and tell us how you're going to grow your economy. So I brought all our partners together, business and private sector and third sector. And we held this big strategic consultation and conversation about the future that we wanted to see for our area, which was York and North Yorkshire. And just by changing the frame of that conversation and not saying, how can we have as much growth, but by saying, what future do you want to be part of? It completely changed the outcome of the strategy.
Yes.
And where we ended up was an aspiration to be carbon negative. And that was partly because of the huge peatlands that we've got. We've got 2 national parks, the North Yorkshire Moors and the Yorkshire Dales. So England's biggest area of peatlands, which obviously well managed, is a carbon soak and a carbon sink. We also had DRACs, with big bioenergy carbon capture
Yes,
and
but
storage.
we've just had a podcast on Drax, and it's definitely not carbon negative or even carbon
Well,
net zero.
so
Drax
here's the
bad.
thing. So I was trying to do my best in the constraints of a system which is geared around growth, and that, and I struggled with that. And when I say struggled, I had mental health problems. I couldn't believe it. I started from suffering with anxiety, all sorts of things that I was like, how are you possibly experiencing this? And I came to realize that it was a dissonance in that I was wanting to do one thing and stuck in a different system. So I had to leave. So it was fortuitous, but not accidental, that I'd been digging my own escape tunnel through.
Okay, a part of you had known a long time that you were going to need to get out.
Yeah. And so selling the books was an opportunity to step out of that world with a little bit of financial security, not very much at all. But it was enough of a stepping stone to take me out and to do the work that I needed on my own personal philosophy and practice. And so that was transformational. So now I can very much look back on that time and understand that green growth paradigm that I was locked in. And now I have a completely different perspective on that. But it's still been all this experience. I guess who I am now is the sum total of all my experience. And for all the things that I would do different now, it's still a good thing to have done.
Can I ask a brief question? You didn't, as far as I can tell, go through Schumacher's regenerative economics program, and yet you got to a place that sounds very like where we got to, which is the current system is not working. How can we create something that actually creates a future that's livable? Can you tell us a little, briefly, edited highlights of your economic growth? Or are you going to get to that when we get to being a rebel
I
economist?
think that's a perfect way in. So one of the big things was Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. So
Right,
so when
2017.
she published Donut Economics, I soaked it up. I brought it into the day job. So we put the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a key part of our decision making and appraisal process for all the work that we were doing. And yeah, so it was, for me, it was donut economics. That was the
Right.
systems, because I'm a geographer by training, so I'm not an economist by training.
Okay.
And that was the systems view that started to align everything that was happening. And obviously, I'm reading a lot of nature books as well. So the nature connectedness part of it was quite prominent. And so I started to piece all these individual bits together. But it was only after I'd left when the Climate Action Leeds, which is where I'm based, they launched, I think it was the UK's first donut city portrait. So they crunched all the data and launched the Leeds Donut Collective. And because I was active on the Donuts national platform, they went, this guy, he seems to know a bit about donut economics. Let's bring him along to the launch.
Right.
So I went along to the launch of Donut Economics, and it was brilliant. And they crunched all the data for Leeds, and guess what? We're overshooting and undershooting.
Right. You're not in the donut at all.
Not in the donut at all. Apart from fresh water, we're all right for fresh water. That's the only bit that we're in. But it was a real transition point for me because during this launch event, we had Rob Shorter from Deal, who came along,
Friend of the podcast.
And he did an exercise where we made the donut. So there were like 70 of us there in this massive room. And we made the donut on the floor with some big bits of rope. So we made the inner the inner social foundation and the outer planetary boundary. And then we stepped into it and walked through it. As you can tell, it affects me every time I think about it.
Yeah, clearly.
Because I stepped outside the planetary boundaries and I was scared for for the first time, I was scared. And then I stepped below the social foundation, and it was a place of sadness and despair. And I had this incredible embodied experience of what this system meant, how this system felt. And I realized that up until this point, so 4 years, I'd been working with donor economics all the way from Rugby, and it hadn't touched here. And when it touched here, everything changed. Yeah. And that really shaped the rest of my approach. So in everything that I do, in helping people and organizations become more regenerative and develop more regenerative and redistributive practices, I always emphasize the importance of the I, of the self, of feeling it, of connecting with it, as well as the we, as well as the organization. So that was my big thing, and I guess that's mapped out the journey that I've been on ever since, and it's taken me to here. So with the books right now, what I'm doing is I'm actually relaunching the subscription Adventurous Inc. On Kickstarter at the moment, with a campaign that runs until the end of September, because I realized it was reading this book, Miles Richardson's Reconnection, which is amazing. He's the pioneer of the science of nature connectedness at Derby University. And reading that, he refers to Abraham Maslow, but it's famous hierarchy of need, which sticks self-actualization right at the top. And he tells the story of how Maslow spent time with the indigenous Blackfoot tribe as he's finalizing his thesis. And so what he saw was this tribe supporting the personal growth of all of its members. And so he put this on a pedestal because of his Western individualistic perspective. What he didn't realize was that they weren't placing the individual at the peak of this pyramid. They saw it as part of their community actualization, which would enable them to exist in cultural perpetuity. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I had this realization that for all the focus on adventure and nature connectedness, it was all coming from a very individualistic perspective, that Western paradigm. What do I get from this? Yeah. What do I get?
Yeah, colonizing our own land.
That was what I was doing with the books as well. So although we've never featured that hero adventurer who conquers everything, it was still done with an individual perspective, or an overly individual perspective. And so I realized I needed more we in the books as well as the me. So that's, it's taken me a while, because I've had things happening in my life. My mum was quite ill for a long time before she passed away at the end of last year. So I wasn't able to do it when I had the realization, but this is what I meant at the start about working out what shape I am and aligning. Right. So now I'm bringing my books back into alignment. And that's what the relaunch and the Kickstarter campaign is about relaunching the business. Yes, to feature all those beautiful natural philosophers, the adventurers, the ecologists who've got so much to tell us, but making space to bring other people in, people like you, man. So that's, this is here for a reason.
Ah, you are kind. For those not looking at the video, he's just pointed to any human power. I am very grateful. Thank you, Tim. I'll pay you later.
Because that's what we need. We need to have more authors who help us reflect on this moment that we're in and our connection to each other. And so yours is going to be so we're shifting to a seasonal approach as well. We used to do it every month, and it's a lot. So I, as part of my understanding of what business needs to be, it's recognizing that you don't just go all the time, and that you have cycles. And for me, a big one is a seasonal approach. So we're shifting from a book per month to 2 books every season to get a nice cadence. And then for those who want it, there's an extra deep read, which is where Any Human Power comes in. And that's going to be our deep read for the autumn season, along with Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, because that was a game changer for me. And there's a beautiful slim volume of poetry that we're going to be featuring called The Wilderness That Bears Your Name. and we don't do a lot of poetry, but I just think that poets have this way of capturing
Yes.
the essence. And James A. Pearson, who's written this, has got this real knack of capturing what the essence of life is. So that's why we're changing, and that's why I talk about being in alignment with myself, because I felt slightly out of kilter, and I guess all of what I'm doing is trying to make sense of it all and consolidate it.
Brilliant. Can I take a step back and ask, in the Donut Economics Leeds meeting where you walked the donut and stepped outside and stepped inside, and it was clearly profoundly moving for you and still is, and you said there were 70 people in the room. Do you think others were similarly moved? Did you see other people come to the same realization as you?
Yes.
Okay. And is Leeds now a donut city or heading that way?
There is a donut collective in Leeds, of which I'm a core member. But is it a donut city? I don't know. I don't think so.
It takes a while to move to that, though. It's taken Amsterdam many years. So is there an intention to head that way, or is the political will not yet there?
There's a political interest in it, but it's so hard for politicians to get the radical nature of it, and I think that's the other reason why I wanted to step away from the public sector and start doing the stuff that we're doing through Piʌot, which is to demonstrate that actually people do get this. People do want a different way, but not necessarily trying to do that through political process. So I know there's lots of people who are working very hard to get councils on board in Leeds and around the UK, and I think it's a tough ask. I think it's a really tough ask because they're pulled in so many different directions. They're so constrained. They've had such a long period of austerity, and people are kind of doing what the Labour government is doing, is in lockstep with this idea that we just need to find a way to get some more growth. We need to get more growth into the system, and that's. I think that's the real challenge for them. So Leeds, to be fair, is doing great stuff. From the time when I was doing that economic development type stuff, they've shifted wholesale. So now they talk about, I think they call it their inclusive growth strategy, but it really is growth with inclusion tacked on, rather than inclusion with that has growth where it needs to have it. And I think that's where we are. That's where we are in this great transformation from being our industrial society to our ecological civilization. It's at different stages, and all credit to them, to the council and the public sector, for getting the bigger picture and trying to move in the right direction as far as they're able within their constraints. But it is a constrained system.
How do we... Okay, so I'm thinking of a number of things. First is, we had a conversation with Georgia, who was at Schumacher the year after me, and is now working with net zero cities, who are very clear that carbon is not all about the carbon. So really, one of the core cities in that group, their question was, what does it take for you, the people who live here, to feel pride in your neighbourhood? And as a result of working through that, they're building towards something really regenerative. And it seems to me that changing the narrative, as ever, is at the core. That politicians worldwide are constrained by the narratives within which they work, and those narrative constraints are quite tight. They have to talk about freedom and democracy and growth and building jobs. You are someone who's got a lot of hats, some of which are economic and some of which are policy based and some of which are design based and some of which are narrative based. If you had the freedom, the finance, the support, maybe just a basic income, how would you go about changing the narrative at a larger scale so that politicians were not so constrained?
It's one of the things that we're actually trying to do through the Pivot project.
That's
And
handy.
so I'll talk about that in a minute. Just to say that within the Leeds Donut Coalition, one of our prime objectives is to do that, though, is to change the narrative, is to find alternate ways in that don't feel threatening, that paint a picture of the more beautiful future that we know is possible, rather than that overdo the, well, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do the other. Because I think as a movement, either we've been bad or we've been characterized as being really bad at painting the positive
We've been really
picture.
bad.
All
We just keep telling people the really bad data points and think that that'll change behavior. And if we don't give them options of what they could do instead, then it can't change behavior.
Yeah.
So yes, we've been really bad.
So I think we need to really address that and help. I sometimes talk about it in terms of it help people emancipate themselves from their mental slavery. You know, that Bob Marley, that Marcus Garvey thing, is that we're so locked in with, for obvious reasons, because this is the structure and this is the mindset that's perpetuated for generations, hundreds of years,
Thousands of
millennia.
years. Yes, in our culture,
in the Western world.
Yeah.
So it's that emancipation is difficult, but it's not impossible. So through the Pivot project, one of the things that we're doing is a project called the Forked Futures, and we've got some funding from the Joseph Roundtree's Collective Imagination Practice Fund to imagine forks away from the future. And it came from the conversation that we had months ago, talking about Audrey Tang and
forking government.
Forking government. And so what we're doing is we're going to identify some forks where we can go, look, this is the direction we took. This is the direction that we could have taken.
Okay,
and
retrospective
use that
forks.
to craft a narrative of what could be, so that we start to recognize the choices that we're not taking.
Right.
And we're going to do the funding doesn't allow us to do lots of stuff, but we're going to imagine 3 different forks and 3 different futures, and then get those animated so that we can really bring it to life in a way that engages people. And the first one that we're going to start off with is about the Labour government coming in and pursuing growth and saying, well, this is what we're going to do, and if instead of coming in and saying that and saying, well, we haven't got enough money to go around, if they'd have said, well, we need to find ways to increase well-being, and instead have said, right, well, we're going to abolish Mondays, so no one ever has to work on a Monday again, and it becomes a new sort of secular Sabbath. And imagine all the things that you could do if you got your Mondays back and you didn't have to work. So that's the first of our forks, is we're going to abolish
4-day
Monday
week
as a way of, as an alternative to saying that, well, we're in a bit of a hole to get ourselves out. We need to find this elusive growth. Well, no, let's find an elusive connection that we've lost. What would you do with that Monday that you've suddenly got back? Would it be developing your connection with friends and family? Would it be spending more time in nature? Would it be volunteering as part of your community? It would be something completely different, which would help us transition to the world that we need to be, and see that there are other ways through that don't rely on ever increasing productivity and searching for this mythical thing, which it doesn't exist anymore. It clearly existed for a long time and served a lot of people very well.
Well, it existed while we had a carbon pulse with the oil, and we didn't care about the impact downstream of everything else. I would say that you need to build into that story that we're cancelling Mondays and you're still going to earn the same amount of money. It's not that you're losing 20% of your income. Because that's what killed it when Corbyn suggested a 4-day week. And people assumed he was then meaning that he was going to cut everybody's income, because it was politically expedient for them to assume this. But you have to make sure that that's really clearly not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Well done. I look forward to seeing the animation. That's going to be really exciting. Do you know what the other forks are?
No. So we're putting it out through the collective, and we're going to see who comes up with others. It's been surprising, actually, even amongst this loose arrangement of radical thinkers and regenerative thinkers. When you say, right, pick a fork, choose the thing that you're going to fork away from. Even we have struggled to go, oh gosh.
Can I make a couple of suggestions
Oh
in
yeah,
real
please
time?
do.
Alrighty. So the Labour government wishes to build 1.5 million homes. And at current averages, we use 40 litres of water per day, drinking water, to flush the toilet. If they made, and that's daily, if they made 1.5 million new homes with composting toilets, which is possible, there are entire apartment blocks in Geneva now that have composting toilets. Composting toilets are not a hole in the ground that they used to be in our great-great-great-great-grandfather's time when earth closets and water closets were two distinct things. Composting toilets and those 1.5 million homes, I did the arithmetic, you'll need to redo it because don't have it to hand, but 40 litres by 1.5 by 365 gives you a serious amount of drinking water not being, because it's not just that we're not flushing the water down the loo, it's that the water then goes and joins with the industrial effluent and then has to be sorted so that we can recycle the water for you all to drink. But now it's full of hormones and reproductive control pills and antibiotics and stuff that we cannot get out. And the sludge that comes off is so toxic that when you spread it on fields to grow things, if you then want to build houses on those fields, you can't because it's considered too toxic. But you're okay growing food there. So that would be one of my big ones, is every new house has to be fully resilient and has to be within your net carbon targets. I don't know how you build 1.5 million homes and maintain Labour's net zero targets, even accounting as even Drax built in, and I would take Drax. That would be my other thing. Get rid of Drax. Cutting down old growth forests in North America, pelleting them, shipping them across the world in order to pretend that you're zero carbon, when really, if you burn that coal to produce the same power, you would release less CO2. It's not an option. So that would be another one.
I love it. And you've leapt straight into another one of the avenues that Pivot is examining, actually. And so we're looking at water companies, and we think we know what a water company is, and it's an overly leveraged sphere of, can I say shit? Is
Yes.
that all right?
Yes.
Sphere of shit.
Yes.
Because of the way that they've been embedded into our economy and been seen as
an ATM for investors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if so a big part of Pivot is recognizing that business is still, yes, it's tremendously damaging, and really it's business that's the agent of the Anthropocene. It's ushered this in, and yet that's just the way we conceptualize business at the moment, because business is actually one of the most effective ways, but the most effective way that we've ever found of collaborating. I mean, that's what a company means. It's people that you break bread with, companion, people that you break bread with.
Right.
So we need to take the best of the old world and transform it for the new world. So one of our projects that we're working on, I've got a meeting about it this afternoon actually, is to look at, well, could we reimagine water companies as community-owned enterprises that are the basis of a bioregion?
Yes.
And then you can start to look at managing the stuff of life, the water, managing the nutrient flows in a place.
Yeah.
So looking exactly at effluent flows and how it gets into the system and how you manage it within the system.
Right.
And all of a sudden, when the emphasis changes from how much investment can we extract from this, how much dividend can we get this cash cow to pay, because people are always going to need water. People are always going to live in this
and they're
place
going to need sewage facilities.
So that's such a valuable thing. It shouldn't be handed over to the market. It needs to be owned by the local community.
Yes, and if you do it as a River Simple global governance model, are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
And River Simple have a template for that. And I would add, River Simple has 6 people on the board. So there's the shareholders, they still exist, the workers, the local community, the global environment, the supply chain, and the customers. Add in future generations, someone to speak for future generations. Then that whole business becomes a community business model. And as soon as you start going upstream, you are going to be looking immediately at industrial farming, and then everything spreads. It would be really useful. You're very near to Sheffield, where Opus has the River Dawn project. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, so very briefly, we're going to have the River Dawn, someone from the River Dawn project come onto the podcast, but it's not till early next year because I'm booked way, 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 way ahead. So for everybody listening, very, very briefly, 146 kilometers of the River Dawn is being, as we speak, mapped at the highest resolution Google will allow, which is pretty high, to create a map across space, but also through time. So if you had fished there with your granddad when you were a wee boy and you've got a picture of here's me with this fish, that goes on. And
I did actually. I did
there
fish
you
in
go.
the River Dawn as a boy.
There we go. They want your picture. And then everybody else has got a picture and all the newspaper articles and anything about the dawn, together with, for instance, real-time oxygen indicators and rainfall for the whole of the bioregion, which happens to map onto the political area, whatever it is, North Yorkshire, I don't know. Probably West. I have no idea.
South.
But anyway, whatever that political area is, it happens to map quite closely to the bioregion of the dawn. It'll have cameras focused on, and if the AI thinks it sees, let's say, sewage outflow, it will then text people who are self-defined river stewards, who it knows are within reach because the AI knows exactly where you are. Scary, but never mind. And if one of you goes, yeah, I'm right there, I'll get it. The others, the other dozen are stood down. You go and you go, yes, that is a heap of feces. You now know what that looks like. Thank you. Or no, that isn't actually. That's a bunch of leaves. Don't worry about it. And the river can then issue its own currency, river coins, which at the moment have no value. But when enough stewards or people doing good stuff have got enough coin, they can decide what it's worth. And maybe you get to, I don't know, go swimming in the local freshwater swimming bit at a time when nobody else is there because you've got a couple of river coins. It's then worth what they want it to be worth. And Audrey Tang, our hero, who has agreed to come onto the podcast for our 5th anniversary edition, I am very happy, has given them the AI that talked to a river in Taiwan, but that river didn't have access to all of this data. The scientists are really dizzily happy about this because they're going to get access to huge amounts of data in real time. And anyone can interrogate the river, the AI, as if it were the river. The river will then appear to have sentience. I'm talking to ChatGPT at the moment about how we build resilient culture, and I know it's reflecting my language, but it's like having a conversation with a very smart person. So you'll be able, and if some company somewhere dips a load of effluent in and everything's dying, the river will scream in real time to everybody, and it will be immediately obvious what's happened. So even if we don't have actual legal personhood for that river yet, the argument for having it will be massively, limbically accelerated. And so bring that into the conversations around water. And I think we have a game changer. I was so excited talking to the Opus people about this.
That's beautiful. And this is the thing. So I was on a panel last week, and someone said, well, I suppose they were sort of speaking to the green growth agenda, and they were saying, well, we've got to do this. We haven't got any other choice because we don't have an alternative to capitalism. What? And that just, this conversation just proves that we do have an alternative, and it's not some overly radical thing that is a threat to everyone. It's not an
no, that's the thing. It's better. It's actually a better world.
Exactly. It can actually help people with the things that we want as people, which is belonging and safety and connection.
Did you say this on the panel? Please tell me you said this after your head had finished exploding.
Gently, yes. I mean,
well done. You're very good, because I would just explode.
I don't like to get into these things, but yes, we do have the alternative models. We just need to, and this is what this is what Pivot is about. Is if we recognise that the political system just is too scared to do something about it, then how do we put people power behind that? And I think that's, for me, that's the key. And because we've got the research that says 56% of people think that capitalism does more harm than good. In the UK, that's a global figure. In the UK, it's 53%. But people get that the system doesn't work.
They don't know that there are alternatives.
That's it. They just don't have an alternative.
Yes.
We need to offer people viable alternatives and ways that give them the agency to create the futures that they long for. We long for a better future. At an embodied level, we understand that we are not fulfilling our potential as unique, sentient parts of life's great system. We know that we're not fulfilling that. And that's why we've got all sorts of health problems, mental health problems, physical health problems, because the system isn't working for us and we're not working for it. But finding that ecological niche and finding that harmony that exists right within us is the way forward. And I think we need to find ways we need to bring people into that space in ways that meet them where they are, rather than tell people you've got to change, because that's what
that never works.
That's what they see.
And when you're on the panel and you're able, well done, very gently to say there are lots of alternatives and they're all better in whatever way you said, did you feel heard by the person or people who'd said there was no alternative? Did you see light going on and excellent. All right.
But the interesting thing is, at the end of the conversation, there was a question from the audience which said, "Well, this has all been very good, but what's the solution?" And I think, again, in terms of meeting people where they are, we have to recognise that that's where people are. Is that our reductivist approach is conditioned to go, well, right, there's a problem. Let's go and find a solution. And actually, we need to meet people there as well, and take them by the hand and say, well, actually, there isn't a solution in the way that you understand it. The solution is a process.
Emergence is a process, and we cannot predict where it goes.
Exactly.
Did you get that through, do you think, to the audience?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So we've mentioned pivot several times without actually really moving to pivot, but I just want to check that of your three things that you said, your bookseller, we covered that, regenerative designer and rebel economist, we've kind of covered. If there's anything in those that you want to look at, then please do, but I would really like to look at the origin of pivot, the source of pivot even, and what else you're doing besides the Forked Futures, which I'm extremely happy is happening.
So I sat with pivot for a long time because there's a lot of noise and a lot of people get that something is wrong and rush to a solution. And I was really cautious of that, really cautious of rushing to a solution. But I don't think it is a solution in those reductivist terms. It is a process and a community and a connection. But yeah, so Pivot emerged from my work as a regenerative designer. So I've been using particularly the donut design for business methodology. So you go into a business and you help them map themselves onto the donut and then think about regenerative and redistributive actions that they can take and how that can cascade through the organization. And then you look at the way the organization is structured, and you look at the ownership and the governance and the financing and the networks and something else that I've forgotten. And that bit was always the difficult bit, because the mapping was enlightening, and the coming up with ideas for being more regenerative and more redistributive, it's liberating, and it opens up possibilities within an organization. You can see people getting turned on to it, and then you get to, right, let's talk about your organization and how it enables this, and all of a sudden it closes down.
Because they're defensive? They
not
just
defensive,
feel assaulted?
just because we go, well, we can't do that. Our expectations on, when we develop a new product, it's got to wash its own face within X number of quarters, or all we're measured on is our next growth in each quarter. We can't get the board won't buy into this because of the shareholder expectations. all of those practicalities prevent all of that possibility that the process had opened up. And I guess I went back. So doing this several times, I went back. I became frustrated, and I went back to my old approach, which is what I used to do, which was, strategic thinking, working on policy, working at scale, and went, well, how can we start to address some of those structural issues in a way that is enabling?
Okay.
And where are the levers for change in the system? Looking at the Donna Meadows things about, well, where are we stuck, and where can we get some leverage within the system? And eventually, and it came from a conversation I saw with Satish Kumar, actually, where he just advised people to do the thing. If you think you've got a way forward to something better, then do it. And so I overcame this immense amount of imposter syndrome that I had, and started putting this out into the world and talking about it. And talking about, well, how can we bring a group of people together who understand this context, who get the strategic perspective? How can we bring those together in an emergent and agile way to recognize opportunities to leverage the system, to intervene in ways that create change? So that's what Pivot is. But it's in looking for those opportunities, it's looking to get people behind change, and not just to get the finance sector behind change or politics behind change, all those co-opted systems. It's really looking at, well, where are there other systems, like cultural figures? How can we get cultural figures on board and give them an opportunity to speak to something? A bit like, Taylor Swift has come out in support of Harris. Brilliant. Yes. These people have got such an attentive audience, and because they're not constrained by the everyday system that most of us work in, they've got a freedom to understand the bigger picture. And how can we give those people an opportunity to do something? So that's what Pivot is. So we launched at the start of this year, and we started with a year of listening, and it's a year of, what is ours to do? Where can we best work in service? And so some of the things that I've talked about, the forked futures, the water companies as bioregions, are what's emerged from that year of listening, and really trying. It's bioeconomic R-phase thing about really understanding that the times are urgent, but we need to slow down, and putting that space in to breathe and reflect and see what connections emerge, what patterns emerge, what synthesis comes out of it. So the water companies, it started with a conversation about financing the transition of businesses out of growth-focused capitalism and into alternative economic model or alternative enterprises. And then, well, which companies would you work with? And looking at Dan O'Neill's work on provisioning systems and all that sort of stuff, and then realizing that actually water companies, it's a real live issue that people can see and smell, just what the impact of having life in service to finance is like. That's what it is. Right. And understanding that maybe this is a model for us to turn it around and have finance in service to life in a way that people would get and go, oh, that's what this regenerative thing is about. It's about being able to swim in our rivers. It's about being able to connect, like you were saying with the Opus project in the River Don, my agency and my awareness and my relationship to this place in a way that gives people something more and helps them see, actually, this is what we can be. This is what we could be. So I think that's why that's one of the things that's starting to emerge as a way forward. We're also looking at that, how else we can finance that transition, that phase shift that buys our businesses back, buys our cooperative capital, as in social capital, back from the extractive growth engine, and puts it back in service of well-being and biodiversity and all the things that we know that we need.
Why do we need to buy it back? Why can we not just take it back? It is often sold for next to nothing.
I I agree. I guess the difficulty is that leads to revolt and is an unmanaged process. And what I do think we need a managed process.
Okay.
I guess I would compare it to the compensation that was made to slave owners at the end of slavery. I'm sure it,
Right.
that wasn't something that the
Right. It
country
was
really had the
ethically
money to do.
abhorrent, but you do it anyway. Okay.
It's a pragmatic thing.
Okay. No, that's fair.
And I suppose the other thing I would say on that is that the activist taking to the streets is so valuable. It shifts the agenda, but it's not for everyone. And I think we need to give people agency in creating change. And I guess that's the sort of thing that I'm looking at is how do we give people agency to affect their own futures and future generations' futures in a way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable, doesn't put them out on a limb.
Okay.
There
You're working within the system to change the system rather than just demolish it. That's very wise. You sound as if you're having some really interesting conversations within Opus, and also you've been sitting on panels and talking to people. I'm interested in policy level and political level. It seems to me that there isn't political will to change much about the water companies at the moment, that they've managed somehow to promise they'll do better. And they've been believed by people who want to believe that. Motivated reasoning is a very powerful push. Do you have a sense of how you could get in at a policy level with a new story, a different story that could then change actual national and perhaps international policy?
It's narrative. That is the route back in. It is helping people expand their imagination of what's possible and seeing the beauty and the benefit that can emerge. I think that's got to be the way, and that's that's the social tipping point thing, isn't it? Is that actually those social tipping points are non-linear, and those are the things that we need to be activating, is those non-linear tipping points, and it does come from capturing a moment and capturing a mindset and a swell, and I think that's the way. And I think you could spend an awful lot of time banging your head against an awful lot of brick walls that won't get us there. What we need to find is the creative route to painting that picture of that better future and showing the way through. That for me, that's the really important thing. Getting past the people who say, "Well, we don't have the alternative." It's that leap of faith that takes people past it. So I think that's for me, that's the route in is give people a sense of what better genuinely,
and show the people working, as you said, with the water companies. If we can show regeneration in action, and you can see the river that was full of sewage now running clear, and feel a sense of community with all the people that live in your bioregion, then we've begun to get it through. Do you have a sense within Pivot or within any of the other places that you work of the legacy media beginning to come on board and or being supplanted by what we might loosely call a regenerative medium?
Unfortunately not, because I think legacy media is prone to the extremes, both sides of it, and for all that there are new alternative media platforms, I think they're bubbles. I think we've got a big problem with bubbles and perpetuating the othering. because that's what makes sense to us as humans. Is this is my tribe, and I love my tribe, and everyone else is because that evolutionary that served us incredibly well.
Yeah.
It just doesn't serve
Paleolithic
us well.
emotions, medieval institutions, technology of gods. Yes. But how do we expand our tribe to be the whole world and the web of life? Yes. Because I'm not convinced, interestingly. I have recently, while I had my holiday, read Tyson Yunkaporta's new book. Right Story, Wrong Story would definitely be good in your one of your seasonal things.
Yeah.
And a lot of what he's saying is undermining a lot of our narratives of how people are. There was one point where he said, we don't have the Paleolithic fight and flight that you speak about because we know where the predators are at any given time. And so much of our colonizing of our own mindset is based on the assumption that we know how people functioned in our ancestral lines. And I'm not sure we did, actually. And there's loads in Tyson's book. I am going to endeavour to talk to him on the podcast. But so much of what he's writing has, for me, overturned a lot of my innate assumptions of who we were. And the Paleolithic mindset wasn't necessarily as limbic as we think it was. And that the tribalism wasn't necessarily about othering. That's something that we took on whenever we got hit with the schism with the web of life. Because if you know yourself to be not separate, if you know yourself to be an integral part of the web of life, just because somebody speaks a slightly different dialect or has a slightly different family tree, they are still an integral part of the web of life, and you know that. And I'm not suggesting that fighting didn't happen, but I'm suggesting it was probably much more stylized. I would really want to explore whether people wiped each other out in the way that we do now, or whether there was, let's find whose young warriors are fittest and best. Yay, that's perfectly fine. So that would be a very interesting.
To carry on the inquiry, that was you've anticipated where I was going to go. Actually, this is why I love books, because I think books are our most valuable form of media, actually, because I think when you're reading a book, you're immersed in the context of it. You're not looking for, you don't approach it quite so much with that confirmation bias. Obviously there is a bit of that, but you are more willing to be changed. You're more, because you're immersed in it in a way that you can't be reading a blog or reading something in the news or viewing something on social media. This is the spirit that I try and capture within the books that I feature, is that opportunity for emergence, a much more reflective process that has that opportunity for emergence. And this is why I often say reading is a radical act. It's a radical act of resistance, because it's not, the system doesn't want us to reflect. And I know that sounds terribly conspiracy theorist, but it doesn't serve the system well for us to dwell on things and think about things in the bigger picture, in the longer term. We're stuck. We're mired in the present by a system that wants to keep us there, so it can keep us hungry and keep us malleable. Control.
Yes.
Yeah, crushed.
Yes, Rob Hopkins
in a way
says,
that I don't think authors do that. They don't do that. Books don't do that.
Try not to. Some of them do, but most the good ones don't. Rob Hopkins, in his book From What Is to What If, no, it's the other way around, I think. From What If to What Is, I can't remember, but anyway, it would be very good for your readers. Says capitalism is a disimagination machine, and I don't think individuals made a decision to crush our capacity for imagination. But the sense of separation, scarcity and powerlessness that is the underlying value set of capitalism inevitably leads to that sense of I am on my own. And I'm in a zero-sum game where if I don't win by crushing other people and everything else that exists, then I will not survive. And exactly as you said earlier, the whole and healed cultures know that we are all an integral part of a much wider web, and that we're not on our own, and therefore we don't have that sense of individuation and panic underlying everything.
And I guess that's the other thing that I'm trying to do with the relaunch of the book club is the club bit, is the community aspect of it. So I've always had podcasts with the authors of older books that I've featured, and I did them purposefully as live events, so we do it live on Zoom, so that the community could come in and join us. But it still centered me and the author thinking about things. And so with the relaunch, we're going to decenter that and center the community's feeling about the books, not the thinking about the books. Because I do think that this is book clubs can get a bit of a bad name because it becomes this intellectual one-upmanship. Who's got the best take on what this book means? And it can be, so you'd think a club, and it sounds like a community. It sounds like something that would be nourishing and beneficial. But actually, I think because it turns into that, who's got the most intellectual take on this? It reduces the opportunity for bonding with each other. So what we're going to do is shift the attention not to what do you think about this book, but what did this book make you feel? And again, this is that thing about the alignment that I'm trying to center in all of the things that I do. This, you heard from me that how my shift from thinking about things to feeling about things was fundamental. It's now fundamental in all the work that I do with people and organizations, and now finally I'm able to put it right at the heart of Adventurous Inc, the book subscription as well, because I think it's what we really need, and that's what I'm trying to do really, I guess, is work out what is mine to do in this moment with the things that I've got as tools, as forms of agency, and I'm just trying to work it out. I am an example of emergence, as we all are.
Yeah, but you're conscious emergence, and that's how we get conscious evolution, is consciously being at the leading edge of into becoming. That's so wonderful. And you seem to have found that intersection where your heart's greatest joy meets the world's greatest need, which I can't remember who said that. I was told it by Della Duncan when I was at college, and she got it from somebody else. But that seems to me, if everybody was able, if everybody had, in a way, the privilege and the agency to seek that out and then embody it, we would be in a different place. And you're there, and you're leading by example. I think it's fantastic. We're heading towards being out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to say? And can you tell us, I will put links in the show notes, but tell us anyway how people can find your Kickstarter and this amazing Adventurous Inc book club, and anything else that you want to link to.
No, we've covered everything, and thank you for thanks for referencing Della there. That's just beautiful. And I am there. It's taken me a long time. I've been working on this since 2015, really. Sorry, the emotion is coming from. I did it when my father passed away in 2015,
right? And
I turned 40, and the two things happened within a couple of months, and things like that change you. And so, this is 9 years of trying to find that connection and that sweet spot. So thank you for that. Yes, all right. So Adventurous Inc. It's www.adventurousinc.co.uk.
Inc with a K.
Inc with a K. Yes, INK.
Yeah.
The logo looks something like that.
Oh, cool. Wow.
So with the rebrand, I couldn't change the brand, could I?
No. Well, not without getting a lot more ink on your.
I'm committed. For those of us who are listening, I've got a tattoo of the Adventurous Inc logo on my arm.
Yes, send us a picture of that. We'll use it on the website.
So yeah, and the Kickstarter is there. You can find me and my regenerative design practice. I am timfrenneaux.co. You can work out how to spell it.
I will put it in the show notes. Yeah.
And the Pivot project is wepivot.today.
Yeah.
And that's The V in Pivot, the V is upside down to represent a fulcrum.
Because you are a designer.
The internet is not good at strange characters, so it's just WEPIVOT rather than some strange
dot today.
upside down.
And I will put links in the show notes, people, so you can just go and click the link. Brilliant. Well, I really look forward to where Pivot is going. It feels really exciting. I think give it another 18 months, we'll come back and explore where you've been and where you're going next, because clearly you're right at the leading edge of into becoming. You are in conscious emergence happening. And I couldn't be happier that this is actually alive and real in the world. I write about these kind of things, but you're actually doing it. So enormous thanks for coming on to the Accidental Gods podcast, and let's talk again in a while.
I'd really welcome that. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome.